Welcome to biology. This is called general biology. This is called BSc 1005. And today what we want to do is get an understanding of what biology is and where does it fit in amongst all of the sciences. Well, we have a large category under which fall all of the different sciences that you've probably have heard about at some point. So we have what is called the natural sciences. And this is the title, which means the science of objects or processes observable in nature. And under this category or title, natural sciences, fall all the different sciences that you're familiar with. So when we say natural sciences, it's really a large heading under which fall all the different sciences like anatomy, physics, physiology, and so forth. So because it's a very general definition, it just means the science of objects or processes observable in nature. It encompasses objects and processes, okay? Now, the natural sciences is going to be actually subdivided into two main categories. We have the life sciences and we have the physical sciences. Life sciences study all of the living organisms. And under this category, we're going to have the biologies, okay? The physical sciences study the natural laws and processes other than those of living things. So when we talk about physical sciences, we talk about the non-living objects, okay? Non-living. Whereas life sciences, we study the organisms. If we look at the physical sciences, okay, again, this is the study of the natural laws other than those of living. We have things here like physics, chemistry, astronomy, and geology and meteorology. In all of these particular sciences, we're not talking about any organisms. Okay, we talk chemistry, we're talking about chemicals, how they mix. Physics, we study the velocity of a car, how fast it's going. Astronomy, we study the stars and so forth. So all of these physical sciences do not study living organisms, okay? They study the natural laws and processes other than those of living things. And let's take a look at some of these physical sciences like physics, okay? You ever see this experiment where they take a electrostatic, it's a ball with you put your hands on it and it gives some electrical energy and your hair can all stand on end. This is something done in physics, okay? It's to teach you about electricity. Chemistry, of course, studies how we mix different chemicals and we get new products. Astronomy studies the stars, okay, with the planets, the stars, the universe. Geology studies the mass formations of the planet, like, you know, the rock formations. That's geology. And meteorology, of course, studies the weather. Okay, so all of these are of non-living objects. Okay? Weather is what's called an abiotic factor. It's not live, okay, although it does have force, okay, but a hurricane is something formed by the winds and it's going to not be something that is alive. If we look back at the life sciences, where we said we study living organisms, here we have all of the different biologies, such as microbiology, which studies microorganisms. Okay, microbiology studies the microorganisms. Another biology is bacteriology, and bacteriology studies the bacteria. Okay, there's lots of bacteria all over the place. On your hands, for example, inside your stomach. Parasitology is another biology that studies parasites. Virology is another one. It studies the viruses, okay, like AIDS, Ebola, all these different viruses. Fungi, study of mushrooms and plants, excuse me, mushrooms and yeasts. Okay, fungi studies mushrooms. Don't eat every mushroom you see because some of them are deadly and poisonous. And we have some other of these life sciences like zoology. And zoology studies the animals. Okay? So a zoologist studies all about animals. Botany, of course, studies plants. Now, when we talk about molecular biology, we study what happens at the molecular level. Okay, we look at molecules, okay, things like proteins, for example, and we see how they work at a molecular level. Cell biology studies things at the cellular level. Okay, we study the different types of cells. Histology studies tissues. Okay, when we have a group of cells that are situated in the same place and they all have the same function, we have what's called a tissue. Okay, for example, we have muscle tissue, and histology is what studies tissues. When we study DNA, okay, that is genetics. When we study the ancestry and origin of species, that's evolution. When we study how organisms interact with each other and also with the environment, that is the study of ecology. Embryology studies development. The embryology is going to study from conception, okay, how we get the beginning of an organism, then how it develops, and then it gets born. So all that happens during the developmental phase of an organism is called embryology. Immunology, okay, immunology studies our mechanism of defense. Okay, we have, for example, an immune system with antibodies, okay, and special cells that fight off infections, cancer, all kinds of invasions to the body. And this is going to be immunology. When we study fish, that's marine biology. When we study physiology and also anatomy, these kind of go together because anatomy is the structure, what something looks like, okay? Whereas physiology is how something functions. So for example, if we look at the heart, okay, we can notice that the human heart has 4 chambers, okay, 2 top ones called atrium and 2 bottom ones called ventricles, okay? And there's valves and there's tubes going to and from the heart, but we have a lot of structure we look at. What does it look like? What does the heart look like? We describe the heart and its anatomy, okay, what its structure is. But when we study how the heart works, that is the pumping of the heart, the pumping mechanism, which is to pump blood, well, that's controlled by its own special electrical system, and it's called the pacemaker. Okay, it's called the intrinsic conduction system, and that is really going to be then the function of the heart or the physiology. So with everything, we can look at the anatomy, what it looks like, okay, and then how it functions, the physiology. There's other kinds of specific physiology. For example, neurophysiology is going to be the science that studies the function, in particular, of the nervous system. Exercise physiology, human physiology, we look at the function of the whole organism, all the different parts, all the organs. Endocrinology is going to study the glands, the hormones, the endocrine system, okay? And this is going to control how our body works together with the nervous system. But all of these are examples of physiology. Some subtitles or subcategories of anatomy, we can study the microscopic structure of something, and that's going to be microscopic anatomy. Or we can study what's called the surface anatomy. In other words, we can look at the human body and we can see certain structures that are on the surface. That is going to be surface anatomy. Or gross anatomy studies, for example, first all the muscles, then it studies all the bones, then all the arteries, then all the veins, then all the lymph vessels. So we look at the gross anatomy of something. Regional anatomy studies regions. For example, we can study just the shoulder region, and we can look at the shoulder and we can see what bones are there. We can see what nerves are there. We can see what arteries and veins are there and the muscles. So we look at just a region. That's called regional anatomy. Well, at this point, ready to give you a nice definition of biology. What do we mean then by biology? Well, biology we can define as being the scientific study of life and all of its forms from the ancestral species of 4 billion years ago to the contemporary organisms. Okay, so we study then scientifically life, all of its forms, going back to 4 billion years ago, those very primitive organisms, all the way up to contemporary organisms, and that is what we really mean by biology. Okay, scientific study of life and all of its forms, okay, from the beginning of time to now, contemporary organisms. And when we study biology, it includes all of what we call the life processes. Okay, life processes, these are things like nutrition. These are things that living organisms do. They have to eat, nutrition. They have to digest. They have to grow, develop, breathe, respiration. They have to reproduce. They're regulated chemically, okay? Like the hormones regulate our body chemically. We also have a nervous regulation. The nervous system also is going to keep the body in a certain constant, stable state. We have a defense, that's another life process, the immune system again, and the circulation. All of these are what we call the life processes. So you can see then that biology is a very broad topic, and it's involved in many, many areas. It's involved in things like medicine, okay? It's involved with nutrition, it's involved with ecology, it's involved with many different things. And with technological advances and new research and discoveries, it's easy to see that biology is an ongoing science. It is in a continuous state of flux. Okay? So again, biology then is a multifaceted science. It involves many different areas, as I'm showing you here. And we will stop because I want to keep these modules not more than 10 minutes apiece.